Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The thing about asteroid mining colonies is that nobody builds them to be pretty. REM 6 was a testament to that philosophy. All corrugated metal, exposed wiring, and the kind of architecture that screamed, "We built this in 3 weeks and haven't thought about it since." The air tasted like copper and desperation, recycled so many times it had probably passed through 1,000 lungs before finding its way into yours. Not the kind of place you'd choose for a vacation. Then again, nobody came to REM 6 by choice, least of all the cargo hauler currently being dragged through Processing Bay 9. Finn, just Finn, no fancy titles, no dramatic backstory worth mentioning, had made exactly one mistake. Well, technically 2, if you counted trusting the Galactic Coalition's promise that routine inspections were actually routine. Spoiler alert, they weren't. His hauler had been flagged for suspicious cargo manifests, which was Coalition speak for, "We need to meet our quota," and you looked like an easy target. 3 hours later, he was in shackles, his ship was impounded, and he was learning firsthand why the Orthani had a 1,500-year reputation for being the galaxy's most efficient slavers. Efficient. That was the word they used in the official reports. Not brutal. Not monstrous. Efficient. The Orthani guard dragging Finn by his arm had scales the color of old brass, and breath that smelled like rotting meat marinated in motor oil. His name was something with too many consonants and not enough vowels. Finn hadn't caught it, and didn't particularly care to. What he did care about was the plasma prod the guard kept jabbing into his ribs every time he slowed down. "Move faster, mammal," the guard hissed, his forked tongue flickering between serrated teeth. "You know," Finn said, wincing as another prod caught him in the kidney, "where I come from, we've got these things called please and thank you. Real revolutionary concepts. You should look into them." The guard responded by slamming Finn face first into a bulkhead. Professional courtesy, Orthani style. Processing Bay 9 was exactly what it sounded like. A warehouse where living beings were sorted, catalogued, and assigned value like furniture at an estate sale. Rows of containment cells lined the walls, each one packed with members of species Finn recognized, and several he didn't. There were Klathi, those tall, blue-skinned traders who always smelled faintly of cinnamon. A cluster of Roknari, their rocky hides making them look like mobile boulders, and in the far corner, pressed against the back of their cell like they were trying to phase through the wall, a family of Nimbari. Finn had seen Nimbari before. Hard not to notice them. They looked like someone had taken a rabbit, a koala, and a particularly huggable teddy bear, thrown them in a genetic blender, and added eyes the size of dinner plates. They were small, rarely taller than a human child, covered in soft fur that ranged from cream to dark brown, and possessed a universal cuteness factor that made even hardened criminals go, "Oh," which made them incredibly popular in the slave trade. Wealthy collectors loved them, living decorations that didn't talk back. The Nimbari family in the corner consisted of what Finn assumed were 2 adults and 3 cubs. The father, darker fur, slightly taller, had his arms wrapped around his family like he could shield them from reality through sheer willpower. The mother's ears were pinned flat against her skull, a sign of extreme distress. And the cubs. The cubs were exactly the kind of thing that made Finn's day go from bad to worse. Because Finn, despite being a cargo hauler with questionable judgment and a rap sheet that included unauthorized turbulence and failure to respect customs authority, had one fatal flaw. He gave a damn about kids. Didn't matter what species. Kids were kids, and they didn't deserve to be terrified. This particular philosophical stance was about to cost him. The brass-scaled guard shoved Finn into an empty cell and sealed it with a biometric lock that hummed with enough voltage to double as a bug zapper. "Stay," the guard said, like Finn was a particularly stupid dog. "Boss wants to see you later." "Can't wait," Finn muttered, testing the energy field with his fingertips. It stung, but not enough to kill. Just enough to make escape unpleasant. Standard intimidation protocol. The guard lumbered off, his tail dragging across the metal floor with a screech that set Finn's teeth on edge. And that's when he heard it. A small, choked sound from the Nimbari cell. One of the cubs, the smallest one with fur so pale it was almost white, had dropped something. A ration pack, torn open, its contents spilling across the floor. The cub scrambled to pick it up, his tiny hands shaking. But the sticky nutrient paste had already soaked into the grating. The mother made a soft, keening sound. The father's grip tightened. Because in a place like REM 6, dropping food wasn't just clumsy. It was wasteful. And waste had consequences. A different guard, this one female, with crimson scales and a scar that ran from her eye ridge to her jaw, noticed immediately. She strode over to the Nimbari cell, her clawed feet clicking against the floor like a countdown timer. "Clumsy little rodent," she growled, her voice carrying across the entire bay. "You think food is free? You think the Orthani Collective feeds vermin for fun?" The cub couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a human 5-year-old, pressed himself against his father's leg, trembling. "It was an accident," the father said, his voice barely above a whisper. Nimbari weren't confrontational by nature. Evolution had taught them that the best defense was looking harmless. "Please, he didn't mean—" "Accidents cost resources," the Crimson Guard said. She tapped a control pad, and the cell door slid open. "And resources come from somewhere. Guard Hulvrax will want to know about this." That name, Hulvrax, sent a ripple of fear through the other prisoners. Even the Roknari, who were basically sentient boulders and feared very little, shifted uncomfortably. Finn had heard the name too, 3 times since being processed. Always in the same context. Don't cross Hulvrax. Don't look at Hulvrax wrong. Don't breathe near Hulvrax unless you wanted to learn what your internal organs looked like from the outside. Hulvrax was the facility's head overseer, a position he'd held for 20 years through a combination of ruthless efficiency and creative sadism. The kind of being who didn't just enforce rules, he made examples. And apparently, a dropped ration pack qualified as example-worthy material. The Crimson Guard reached into the Nimbari cell, grabbed the smallest cub by the scruff of his neck, and yanked him out. The cub's father lunged forward, but the mother held him back, terror winning over instinct. Smart. Attacking a guard would get the whole family killed. "Please," the mother whispered. "He's just a child." "Then he should learn young," the guard said. Finn watched this play out from his cell, his jaw clenched so tight he could feel his molars grinding. This was none of his business. He had his own problems. Getting involved would only make things worse. He knew all of this. Intellectually, he understood the tactical value of keeping his head down. But when the guard started dragging the cub toward the center of the bay, and the cub started crying, not loud, theatrical sobs, but those quiet, hiccuping gasps that meant a kid was trying so hard to be brave and failing. Finn's mouth opened before his brain could stop it. "Hey," he called out. "Hey, scales for brains. Yeah, you." The Crimson Guard stopped, turned, stared at Finn like he'd just volunteered for vivisection. Human, she said slowly. Did you just address me? I did, Finn said, gripping the energy field of his cell, despite the pain shooting up his arms. And I've got a question. Does it usually take two of you to handle a toddler? Or is this special training? Like, is there a seminar? Advanced techniques for bullying small children? I bet the certification looks great on a resume. The bay went silent. Even the recycled air seemed to hold its breath. The Crimson Guard's scarred face twisted into something between confusion and rage. You dare. Oh, I dare, Finn said. I super dare. In fact, I'm thinking about daring so hard they'll write songs about it. Terrible songs. Probably in the wrong key. But songs nonetheless. This was, objectively speaking, a terrible plan. Finn was aware of this, but the cub had stopped crying, was now staring at him with those huge, wet eyes, and Finn had apparently decided that dying on this particular hill was preferable to living as someone who watched kids get hurt. The Crimson Guard dropped the cub, who scurried back toward his family, and tapped her communication collar. Hulvrax, she said, her eyes never leaving Finn. I have a situation in Bay 9, human prisoner, displaying behavioral issues. There was a pause. Then a voice that sounded like gravel being chewed by a garbage disposal responded, Bring him to the arena, and bring the mammals he was defending. All of them. The guard smiled. It was not a friendly smile. My pleasure, she said. Finn's cell opened, and 4 more guards appeared as if summoned by dark magic. They hauled him out, slapping restraints on his wrists that were absolutely overkill for someone who weighed maybe 180 soaking wet. As they dragged him past the Nimbari cell, Finn caught the father's eye. The expression there was complicated. Gratitude mixed with horror, mixed with something that looked suspiciously like pity. Sorry, Finn said. I'm really bad at staying quiet. The father just shook his head slowly, as if to say, You have no idea what you've just done. He was right. Finn didn't. But he was about to find out. The arena wasn't really an arena in the gladiatorial sense. No sand, no cheering crowds, no dramatic thumbs-up or down moments. It was just an open space in the center of the facility, surrounded by metal scaffolding and observation platforms, where prisoners were regularly reminded of their place in the cosmic pecking order. The Orthony called it Behavioral Correction Theater. Everyone else called it what it was, a torture chamber with an audience. By the time they dragged Finn into the center of the space, word had spread. Guards lined the upper platforms, watching with the casual interest of people who'd seen this show before and knew how it ended. Other prisoners were herded out of their cells, forced to stand in designated viewing areas because the Orthani believed in the pedagogical value of terror. And there, being pushed to the front row, were the Nimbari family. All 5 of them, including the smallest cub, who was clutching his mother's hand like it was the only solid thing in the universe. Finn was positioned in the center, his arms chained above his head to a suspension rig that left his feet barely touching the ground. His shoulders were already screaming, and nothing had even happened yet. Then Hulvrax entered. If the other guards were intimidating, Hulvrax was something else entirely. He was massive for an Orthani, easily 9 feet tall, with scales that had darkened to almost black with age. Scars crisscrossed his body, not the kind you got by accident, but the kind you collected like trophies. His eyes were a pale yellow, cold and calculating, and when he moved, every other being in the arena instinctively took a step back. He carried a plasma lash in one clawed hand, its energy coils humming with barely contained violence. Human, Hulvrax said, his voice resonating through the arena like a death knell. You interfered with facility protocol. Did I? Finn said, trying to keep his voice steady. I thought I was just offering constructive criticism. You know, peer review. Hulvrax tilted his head, studying Finn like he was a particularly interesting specimen in a jar. You mammals, he said slowly, always think your words will save you. They won't. He raised the plasma lash. This, Hulvrax announced to the assembled crowd, is what happens when property forgets its place. The first strike came without warning, a crack of superheated plasma that hit Finn's back and felt like someone had dragged a branding iron across his skin. He bit down on his tongue hard enough to taste blood, refusing to give Hulvrax the satisfaction of a scream. The second strike followed immediately. Then the third. In the crowd, the Nimbari mother had pulled all 3 cubs against her, trying to cover their eyes, but the guards wouldn't allow it. One of them, the crimson-scaled one from earlier, physically moved the mother's hands away, forcing the family to watch. The smallest cub, the one Finn had tried to help, stood perfectly still. His huge eyes were locked on Finn, unblinking, tracking every strike. Strike 4, strike 5. Finn's vision was starting to blur, his back a symphony of agony, but he held on to one thought. Don't scream. Don't give them the satisfaction. Strike 6. Hulvrax paused, frowning. No cries, human? No begging? Sorry, Finn gasped, tasting copper. I left my begging voice in my other pants. Strike 8. The watching prisoners looked away, unable to bear it. All except the Nimbari cubs. The mother was shaking, tears streaming down her furry face. The father had his eyes squeezed shut, his whole body trembling. But the smallest cub, the one with the pale fur, watched with an intensity that seemed wrong for someone so young. Strike 9. And Finn, delirious with pain, his nervous system staging a full revolt, did something completely insane. He laughed, not a big laugh, just a small, broken chuckle that bubbled up from somewhere deep in his chest. What? He wheezed. Is this the best you've got? Because honestly, I've had worse hangovers. The arena fell completely silent. Hulvrax's expression shifted from satisfaction to confusion to pure, incandescent rage. You dare! He roared, raising the plasma lash high above his head, the energy coils flaring white-hot for what would clearly be a killing blow. And that's when the smallest cub spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, calm, clear as crystal in the sudden silence. Count your family, the cub said, looking directly at Hulvrax. They'll all go next. The plasma lash hung in the air, frozen mid-swing. Hulvrax stared at the cub, this tiny, trembling thing with fur like fresh snow, and eyes too large for its face, and for a moment, just a moment, something flickered across the overseer's scarred features. Not fear, exactly. More like the momentary confusion of a predator who'd just heard prey growl back. Then he laughed. It started as a low rumble in his chest and built into a full-throated roar that echoed off the metal walls. The other guards joined in, a chorus of hissing, clicking amusement that sounded like a machine breaking down in slow motion. Did that rodent just threaten me? Hulvrax asked, turning to address the crowd like a performer working an audience. Did anyone else hear that? Because I think I need my hearing checked. More laughter from the guards. Nervous, dutiful laughter from some of the prisoners who knew better than to stay silent when the overseer made a joke. But the Nimbari cub didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't back away. He just stood there, small and impossibly calm, staring at Hulvrax with those dinner plate eyes. What's your name, little mammal? Hulvrax asked, lowering the plasma lash and approaching the cub with exaggerated slowness, like a parent indulging a child's tantrum. Let me guess, something squeaky? Something precious? Nico, the cub said quietly. Nico, Hulvrax repeated, savoring each syllable. Well, Nico, do you know what happens to small creatures who make threats they can't back up? Nico didn't answer, didn't move, just kept staring with an intensity that was starting to unnerve some of the watching guards, even if they wouldn't admit it. The cub's mother had collapsed to her knees, her hands pressed over her mouth to stifle the sobs. The father looked like he wanted to rush forward, to snatch his son back, but the Crimson Guard had a plasma prod pressed against his ribs, a clear message to stay put. The other two cubs were crying now, quiet and helpless. But Nico stood alone, separate from his family by 3 feet that might as well have been 3 miles. I'll tell you what happens, Hulvrax continued, leaning down until his massive head was level with the cubs. His breath, that distinctive Orthani smell of rot and chemicals, washed over Nico's face. They get hurt, badly, and their families watch, and everyone learns a very important lesson about respect. He straightened up, addressing the arena again. 2 examples for the price of 1. The Orthani Collective is feeling generous today. Some of the guards cheered. Most of the prisoners looked at the floor. And Finn, still hanging from his chains, his back screaming in agony, watched this unfold with a growing sense of horror, mixed with something else. Something he couldn't quite name. Because there was something wrong about this picture. Not wrong in the obvious way, but wrong in a deeper, more fundamental sense. The cub's eyes. They weren't the eyes of a terrified child. They were calculating, patient, ancient in a way that made Finn's skin crawl. Hulvrax raised the plasma lash again, this time pointing it at Nico. Last chance, rodent. Apologize to me. Beg for mercy. Make it entertaining, and maybe I'll only break one of your legs instead of... Your clutch mother, Nico interrupted, his voice still that same quiet monotone, lives in the western provinces of Orthax Prime. She has 6 offspring from 3 different mates. 4 of them visit her regularly. You haven't been back in 8 cycles. The arena went dead silent. Hulvrax's lash arm lowered slowly, his yellow eyes narrowing to slits. What did you say? Your youngest sibling, Nico continued, as if reading from a grocery list. The one with the white belly scales. He operates a merchant vessel near the fringe. He has 2 hatchlings. They're 5 and 9 cycles old. He keeps their images on his command console. The female hatchling likes to draw. The male wants to be a pilot. The temperature in the arena seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hulvrax's scales had gone rigid, his whole body locked in a predator's stance, perfectly still, perfectly focused. How, he hissed, would a slave rat from the outer colonies know anything about my family? Nico tilted his head slightly, the gesture eerily reminiscent of how Hulvrax himself had moved earlier. I know lots of things. Your second eldest brother works in facility administration on Rem 3. Your clutch sister is a breeding overseer on Orthax Prime. She has access to genetic archives. Enough, Hulvrax growled, but there was something new in his voice now. Something that might have been concern, or anger, or both. You have 11 blood relatives, Nico said, taking a small step forward. The guards around him tensed, but none of them moved to stop him. 14 if we count clutchmates. 26 if we include offspring. Would you like me to list their names, their locations, their schedules? Finn, despite the pain radiating through his entire body, felt his mouth go dry. This wasn't a threat from a scared kid. This was something else entirely. Something precise. Something cold. Hulvrax looked around at his guards, at the watching prisoners, and Finn could see the calculation happening behind those yellow eyes. This was a public arena, a place of power, and he was being challenged by something that weighed maybe 30 pounds, soaking wet. "You think listing names frightens me?" Hulvrax said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "You think I care about some database hack? Every fool with a stolen datapad thinks they're a threat." "Not a threat," Nico said simply. "A promise. Then make it interesting." Hulvrax raised the plasma lash, pointing it directly at the cub's face. "Because right now, all I see is a mouthy little meal who's about to learn what happens when you waste my time." Nico didn't even blink as the crackling energy coils hummed inches from his nose. "Count them," he repeated, his voice somehow carrying to every corner of the arena despite its softness. "When you try to sleep tonight, count your family members. All of them. Remember their faces. Remember where they live." "And then what?" Hulvrax demanded. "And then," Nico said, "try to reach them. See who answers." For 5 long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Hulvrax struck, not at Nico, but at the air beside him, the plasma lash cracking like thunder. "Enough! Guards, take this vermin back to his cell. All of them. Solitary confinement. No food for 3 days. He turned back toward Finn, who was still suspended in his chains. "As for you, human—" But before he could finish, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the arena in crimson. A computerized voice announced, "Security breach in Section 12. All personnel respond." Hulvrax cursed in his native tongue, something guttural and vicious, and stormed out of the arena, barking orders at his subordinate guards. The crimson-scaled guard grabbed Nico roughly by the arm, but the cub went limp, allowing himself to be dragged without resistance. As the Nimbari family was herded away, Nico looked back at Finn one last time and smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just played a winning hand and was waiting for everyone else to realize they'd lost. Then he was gone, and Finn was left hanging in the arena, his back on fire, his mind racing. What the hell had he just witnessed? More importantly, what had he gotten himself caught in the middle of? They left Finn hanging in the arena for 3 hours. Not out of cruelty, well, not entirely, but because the security breach turned into multiple security breaches, and then into a facility-wide lockdown. And suddenly, nobody had time to worry about one half-dead human suspended from chains in the behavioral correction theater, which gave Finn plenty of time to think, and regret, and wonder if his particular brand of suicidal heroism was going to finally catch up with him in a permanent way. His back felt like someone had used it as a canvas for abstract art, rendered entirely in fire and broken glass. His shoulders had gone past pain into a weird numbness that was probably not medically ideal. And every time he tried to shift his weight, the chains dug deeper into his wrists, leaving marks that would turn into spectacular bruises, if he lived long enough to bruise. The emergency lights had stopped flashing after the first hour, replaced by a dim amber glow that meant the facility was in standby mode. Finn could hear boots on metal, distant shouts, the occasional crackle of plasma weapons being test-fired. Whatever was happening, it had the guards spooked. Good. He hoped it was a full-scale prison riot. He hoped every prisoner in this metal hellhole was currently making the Orthani's lives as miserable as possible. He hoped— The sound of careful footsteps interrupted his increasingly violent fantasies. A figure emerged from the shadows at the arena's edge, moving with the kind of deliberate caution that suggested either extreme fear or extreme purpose. As it got closer, Finn recognized the darker fur, the protective hunch of the shoulders. Chim, the Nimbari father. "You've got to be kidding me," Finn muttered. "They let you out?" "No," Chim said quietly, approaching the suspension rig. His voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I found a way. Found a way. Right. Because locks just open themselves when asked nicely." Chim didn't answer. He was studying the chains, his large eyes reflecting the amber light. Up close, Finn could see that the Nimbari was shaking. Not dramatically, just a constant fine tremor that ran through his entire body. "You need to leave," Finn said. "Right now, before someone sees you. I appreciate the thought, but—" "He's my son," Chim interrupted, and there was something raw in those 3 words that made Finn stop talking. "My youngest, and you tried to protect him." "Yeah, well, look where that got us." Chim reached up. He was tall for a Nimbari, but still had to stretch, and touched the chain mechanism. His fingers moved with surprising dexterity, finding seams and pressure points that Finn hadn't even noticed. "We're not what you think we are," he said softly. "Yeah, I'm getting that impression." The chains clicked. Once. Twice. "The plasma residue," Chim explained, his voice taking on a lecturer's tone, like he was teaching a class instead of breaking someone out of restraints. "It weakens the locking mechanism's magnetic seal. Not by much, but enough." "How do you know that?" "Because we've been studying Orthani technology for 600 years. The chains released. Finn dropped like a sack of potatoes, his legs refusing to support him after hours of suspension. He hit the arena floor hard, gasping as fresh agony shot through his shoulders and back. Chim knelt beside him, small hands hovering uncertainly. "I'm sorry. I didn't think about the landing." "It's fine," Finn wheezed, trying to push himself upright and failing spectacularly. "Just give me a minute, or 6, maybe a week." "We don't have a week." Chim glanced over his shoulder, ears swiveling like radar dishes. "The guards will return soon. The lockdown is almost over. Then you should go. Get back to your cell before they realize you're missing." "I can't." "Why not?" Chim looked at him with those impossibly large eyes, and Finn saw something there that he hadn't expected. Guilt. Deep, crushing guilt. "Because of what's about to happen," the Nimbari said. "Because my son, Nico, he wasn't making empty threats." Finn managed to get himself into a sitting position, his back screaming in protest against every movement. "Yeah, I noticed. That whole count your family thing was pretty specific. How did a kid know all that information about Hulvrax?" "He's not a kid. Not really." "What?" Chim sat back on his haunches, his tail curling around his feet in a gesture that Finn's exhausted brain interpreted as nervous. "The Nimbari conquered," he began, speaking quickly and quietly, "is older than most species currently traveling the stars. We've been around for 8,000 years. We've seen empires rise and fall. We've watched civilizations destroy themselves. And we've survived by being underestimated. So you're saying you're secretly badass?" Finn asked, trying to process this information through the fog of pain and exhaustion. "Because, from where I'm sitting, you look like refugees getting sold to the highest bidder." "That's the point," Chim said. "We look harmless. Cute, even. Your word, not mine. And while everyone's dismissing us as prey animals, we're watching, learning, remembering." "Remembering what?" "Everything," Chim's voice dropped even lower. Who takes us? Where they go? Who they sell us to? Every face, every name, every family member, every place they call home. Finn felt something cold slide down his spine, and it had nothing to do with his injuries. You're not prey, he said slowly. You're cataloging predators. We prefer to think of it as documentation. That's a very polite word for what sounds like a hit list. Chim's expression didn't change, but his ears flattened slightly. We are not violent by nature. We don't start conflicts. We simply respond, eventually. Eventually, like right now? Eventually, like when we've confirmed that a particular operation or individual has crossed certain lines, lines involving our young. Chim looked at Finn directly. Hulvrax has been running this facility for 20 years. In that time, 193 Nimbari have passed through here. 41 of them were cubs. 12 of those cubs were separated from their families and sold to collectors who— He paused, his voice catching. Who do things that even the Orthani consider excessive. Jesus, Finn whispered. We tried other approaches first. Appeals to the Galactic Coalition, economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure. All of it was ignored or dismissed, so we moved to more direct measures. Like threatening the guy's entire bloodline? Like removing the support structure that allows people like Hulvrax to exist? Chim stood up, offering Finn a surprisingly strong hand. My son is what we call an arbiter. Every generation, a few of our young are born with perfect recall and the ability to coordinate actions across vast distances. Nico remembers every face he's ever seen, every conversation he's ever heard, and he can communicate with others of his kind instantaneously. Finn let himself be helped to his feet, swaying but upright. So when he was standing in that arena, listing off Hulvrax's family members, he was marking them. Every arbiter within 3 sectors now knows their locations, their patterns, their vulnerabilities, and steps are being taken. What kind of steps? Chim didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, How many family members did Nico mention? 11 blood relatives, 14 with clutchmates, 26 including offspring. I remember. By the time Hulvrax tries to contact them, and he will try, because that seed of doubt has been planted, how many do you think will answer? The cold feeling in Finn's spine spread to his chest. You're not just threatening them. You've already moved against them. We're not threatening anyone, Chim corrected gently. We're implementing consequences. There's a difference. That's— Finn searched for words and came up empty. That's terrifying. Yes, Chim agreed. It is. We find that terror is an excellent teacher when all other methods have failed. A door clanged somewhere in the distance. Voices shouted orders. The facility was coming back online. You need to hide, Chim said urgently. They'll come looking for you soon. Head toward Section 8. It's the maintenance sector. Lots of places to avoid detection. When the chaos starts, make for the docking bays. Find a ship that's being prepped for departure and stow away. What chaos? The kind that happens when an entire facility realizes their chain of command has been systematically dismantled. Chim turned to leave, then paused. Why did you do it? He asked. Why did you speak up for my son? You didn't know us. You had no obligation. Finn laughed, which hurt more than he expected. You know, I've been asking myself the same question. Best answer I can come up with? I'm an idiot with a functioning conscience. Terrible combination. Something that might have been a smile crossed Chim's features. The galaxy needs more idiots like you, he said. Then he was gone. disappearing into the shadows with surprising speed for someone who supposedly wasn't a threat. Finn stood alone in the arena, his back throbbing, his mind reeling, trying to process everything he'd just learned. The Nimbari weren't victims. They were something far more dangerous. They were accountants. Patient, methodical, utterly ruthless accountants who waited decades if necessary and then balanced the books with extreme prejudice. And he'd accidentally saved one of their most important assets. "Well," Finn said to the empty arena, starting to limp toward Section 8, "this is either going to be the best decision I've ever made or the last decision I'll ever make. 50-50 odds. I'll take it." Behind him, in the depths of the facility, something exploded. The chaos, it seemed, was starting right on schedule. Section 8 smelled like ozone, burnt plastic, and regret. Finn had made it maybe 200 meters before his legs decided they'd had enough and staged a formal protest. He'd collapsed behind a stack of fuel canisters, breathing hard, his vision swimming with black spots that suggested his body was seriously considering shutting down entirely. The explosion he'd heard had been followed by two more. Then the lights had flickered. Then the emergency alarms had started up again, this time with a different tone. Not the measured alert of a security breach, but the panicked shriek of a facility actively falling apart. Somewhere nearby, guards were shouting, running. The metallic clang of boots on grating echoed through the maintenance corridors like a drummer who'd forgotten how rhythm worked. Finn pressed himself deeper into his hiding spot and tried to look inconspicuous, which was difficult when you were a 6-foot human covered in plasma burns and bleeding from multiple locations. "This is fine," he muttered to himself. "Everything is fine. Just a normal day. Normal explosions. Normal existential terror." His back chose that moment to send a fresh wave of agony through his nervous system, as if reminding him that nothing about this situation qualified as normal. Then the lights went out completely. Not flickered, not dimmed, just gone, replaced by absolute darkness that pressed against Finn's eyeballs like a physical thing. Emergency lighting should have kicked in. Battery backups. Something. Nothing came on. In the darkness, Finn heard footsteps. Not the heavy tromp of Orthani guards, but something lighter, smaller, moving with purpose through the blackness, like they could see perfectly well. "Human," a voice said. Young, calm, familiar. "Nico?" Finn whispered. "Yes." "How are you?" "Never mind. Stupid question. You're doing the creepy child thing where you know things you shouldn't." "Got it." A small hand found Finn's in the darkness. The fur was soft, warm, completely at odds with the calculated coldness in the cub's voice. "Come with me," Nico said. "Quickly." "I can barely walk." "Then I'll help you. But we need to move now. The facility's main reactor is going to experience a catastrophic malfunction in approximately 8 minutes. Finn let himself be pulled to his feet, biting back a scream as his back protested. Catastrophic malfunction. You mean explode. That's a crude but accurate assessment. Did your people do that?" "No," Nico said, guiding Finn through the darkness with surprising strength for someone who probably weighed less than a medium-sized dog. "The Orthani did that themselves. Poor maintenance protocols. We simply highlighted the issue through a series of unfortunate equipment failures that happened to occur simultaneously." That's a very diplomatic way of saying sabotage. We prefer aggressive quality control. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the imminent explosion, Finn almost laughed. "Your people are terrifying, you know that?" "Yes," Nico said simply. "That's the point." They emerged from the maintenance corridor into a larger passage. Emergency strips along the floor provided just enough light to see by. Apparently, the Nimbari hadn't disabled everything. Other prisoners were flooding past, taking advantage of the chaos, heading toward what Finn assumed were the docking bays. Nobody paid attention to a wounded human being led by a small alien child. Everyone had their own problems. "Where's your family?" Finn asked as they joined the flow of escaping prisoners. "Already at the extraction point. They're waiting for us." "And Hulvrax?" Nico's hand tightened fractionally on Finn's. "He's been trying to contact his family for the past 2 hours. None of them are responding. His clutch mother's residence is no longer transmitting. His brother's merchant vessel is gone from its registered route. His clutch sister hasn't reported for her shift. They're all gone," Nico confirmed. "Not killed. We're not murderers, just relocated to places where their assets have been frozen, their credentials invalidated, their reputations destroyed. They'll spend the rest of their lives trying to rebuild what they lost. And every time they think about why it happened, they'll remember the Nimbari they helped enslave." "That's—" Finn struggled to find an appropriate adjective. "Comprehensive. We have 8,000 years of practice." They reached the docking bay entrance just as another explosion rocked the facility. This one was bigger, closer, accompanied by the shriek of metal tearing and atmosphere venting. People screamed, ran faster. The careful evacuation was becoming a stampede. Finn spotted the Nimbari family near a mid-sized transport vessel, the kind used for prisoner transfers. Chim was helping his mate and the other 2 cubs up the loading ramp. When he saw Nico and Finn approaching, relief flooded his features. "Thank the Concord," Chim breathed. "I thought you might not make it." "Your son is surprisingly good at navigation," Finn said, letting Nico guide him up the ramp. "And surprisingly terrifying at psychological warfare." "He gets that from his mother," Chim said, which earned him a tired smile from Lila despite the chaos around them. Inside the transport, a dozen other escaped prisoners were already securing themselves in crash seats. The Klathi traders, some of the Roknari, a few species Finn didn't recognize, all of them looking shell-shocked but alive. "Everyone hold something," Chim called out, moving to the pilot station with the confidence of someone who'd flown before. "This is not going to be a smooth departure." "Wait," Finn said. "You can fly this thing." "I told you," Chim said, his hands dancing over the controls with practiced ease. "We're not what you think we are. Belt in. Now." Finn dropped into the nearest crash seat, fumbling with restraints that weren't designed for human anatomy. Nico climbed into the seat beside him, helping with small, efficient movements. "Thank you," Finn said quietly, "for coming back for me." Nico looked at him with those huge, ancient eyes. "You stood between a predator and a child," he said, "even when it served no purpose, even when it only caused you pain. That's rare, worth preserving." "I just did what anyone would." "No," Nico interrupted. "Most wouldn't. Most species calculate cost versus benefit and choose self-preservation. Humans," he tilted his head thoughtfully, "humans do stupid things for stupid reasons, like compassion, like fairness, like helping someone who can't possibly repay them." "You make it sound like a character flaw." "It is," Nico said, "but it's also why we wanted to make sure you survived. The galaxy needs more species with character flaws like yours." The transport lurched, lifting off its dock clamps with all the grace of a drunk rhinoceros. Through the viewport, Finn could see the docking bay doors, still sealed, still locked. Finn said. "Chim? The doors?" "I noticed," Chim said calmly, accelerating directly toward them. "Are we going to—" The doors exploded outward, shredded by precisely placed charges that had apparently been planted during the chaos. The transport shot through the opening, scraping against twisted metal, and burst into open space just as REM-6 experienced what the official reports would later describe as a total structural failure. From a safe distance, with REM-6 shrinking in the viewport, Finn watched the facility tear itself apart. Not a single massive explosion. That would have been too quick, too merciful, but a series of cascading failures that would take hours to fully collapse, giving everyone time to evacuate, but ensuring the facility itself was completely unsalvageable. "You didn't just want revenge," Finn said, watching the destruction. "You wanted to make sure this place could never be used again." "Correct," Lila said, speaking for the first time since the arena. Her voice was softer than her mates, but no less firm. 193 of our people passed through that place. It needed to be removed from existence. "And Holvrax?" "His vessel launched 6 minutes ago," Nico said, checking a data pad that seemed far too advanced for a supposed slave colony. "He's heading toward Orthax Prime. He'll arrive to find his entire support structure gone. His superiors will blame him for the facility's destruction. His reputation will be ruined. He'll spend the rest of his life as exactly what he made others: property with no power." "Poetic," Finn said. "We try." The transport settled into a cruising trajectory, heading toward coordinates that Chim had apparently already programmed. Behind them, REM-6 continued its slow-motion death spiral. Finn leaned back in his crash seat, every muscle in his body screaming, and started to laugh. Not the desperate, pain-induced laugh from the arena, but something genuine and slightly unhinged. "I helped start a revolution," he said, "by being a smartass. That's going on my resume." "You didn't start anything," Nico said gently. "This was already in motion. You just accelerated the timeline and proved that not all species are worth abandoning." "So what happens now?" "Now," Chim called from the pilot station, "we take you somewhere safe, get you medical treatment, and maybe, if you're interested, introduce you to some people who could use someone with your particular skill set." "What skill set? Getting whipped and making bad jokes?" "Standing up when the intelligent choice is to stay down," Lila said. "Caring about children who aren't your own. Choosing kindness over survival." She smiled, showing small, sharp teeth. "The Conquered has been watching humanity for a while. You're young, violent, reckless. But you have something most species lose after a few 1,000 years." "What's that?" "Hope," Nico said simply. "Irrational, illogical hope that things can be better. That someone should help just because they can. That the right choice and the smart choice are the same thing, even when they obviously aren't." Finn looked around the transport at the escaped prisoners, at the Nimbari family who'd just systematically dismantled an entire criminal operation, at the burning facility in the viewport behind them. "You know what?" he said. "I think I'm going to like working with you terrifying little furballs." "We're not that terrifying," one of the other cubs said, the first time either of them had spoken. "Yes, we are," Nico corrected. "And that's fine. Better to be feared than forgotten." The transport jumped to FTL, leaving REM-6 and everything it represented behind. Somewhere in the wreckage, the official investigation would find no evidence of sabotage. Just structural failure. Poor maintenance, negligence. And somewhere else, in filing systems across 3 sectors, notes would be added to certain names, certain organizations. Marks in a ledger that was 8,000 years old and infinitely patient. The Nimbari Conquered kept excellent records. and they always balance their books.